This 2024 AFC East Season Player Props edition of the Propcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Sign up with promo code MACHINE to score up to $1,000 in bonus cash. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. Get your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM.
Good as he throws deep downfield. It's going to be caught by Metcalf.
Welcome, everyone, to the Propcast, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is Tuesday, August the 27th, here to get into our final two division previews for the upcoming season for our season player props. We'll get into the AFC East today, and then we'll wrap it up later this week on Thursday with the NFC East. Before the next week, we have officially entered week one of the NFL season. But again, still two divisions left, like I mentioned. And if you haven't already gotten a chance to go back and listen to the previous six divisions that we've already gone through, a lot of great information and bets that we did give out for the upcoming NFL season, at least for the season player props. So I highly recommend going back and doing that. But joining me as usual to help me break everything down in this AFC East division, I got my main man here with me. It's ChrisBeCappinn. Chris, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
What's up? Excited again as I always am. We're getting closer and closer to the real thing. We've been getting a lot of appetizers, and preseason is over now. So we'll knock out these last two divisions, starting with the AFC East here today. And I'm excited to jump into this division. There's a lot of moving parts, it kind of feels like, in this division. And I'm excited to hear what you got to say and kind of talk out, a couple of these props, and hopefully we can provide some more. Hopefully we can provide some winners for our listeners and ourselves also.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I like the change that they made that we have. I mean, it's probably been something that's always been there, but this kind of week off with no games going on and teams kind of finalizing rosters and making their cuts and things like that, it kind of gives us an extra week here to put our bets together and get ourselves ready as well for the NFL season as bettors and content creators and all that good stuff as well. So yeah, like you mentioned, it's AFC East division, a lot of moving parts, a lot of different things happening. Obviously, the dynasty, quote unquote, if you want to call it that, of the New England Patriots is no more, officially over with Bill Belichick now in media now. I guess I don't want to say he's officially retired, because I think there's still opportunities for him possibly out there to, become a coordinator again, or maybe a head coach again in the National Football League. But the Tom Brady and Bill Belichick era officially over. Gerard Mayo takes over as the head coach there for the New England Patriots, and they'll be looking for their next quarterback that can take them back to hoisting those Lombardi trophies. And this past draft, they picked up Drake May with, I believe it was a third overall pick, if I'm not mistaken, with the New England Patriots. And then, for the Buffalo Bills, we talked extensively about the departure of Stephon Diggs from the Buffalo Bills, and the Bills just still trying to find a way to get over the hump and getting to the Super Bowl and winning the AFC Championship game. And with the the storyline that's really been dominating throughout the offseason, I guess we can say, has been the New York Jets, right? With Aaron Rodgers poised to return for the Jets as a quarterback, suffering a Achilles injury last year in the first game of the regular season on Monday Night Football. Just unfortunate there if you are a Jets fan, but he seems to be ready to go for the season. So, we'll talk extensively about all these teams here. And of course, the Miami Dolphins with the prolific offense that they do have there, led by Tua and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert in the backfield there as well. So this division, it's still intriguing to me, but it seems like there's going to be a changing of the guard here for this division here, Chris, for the AFC East. Before we continue here with our season player props here, Chris, anything you want to mention about this division here that's kind of caught your eye before we give our player props here? I mean, I kind of went through the general storylines there. I think that's, what's kind of been interesting to me. I'm curious to see how this Buffalo Bills team looks now with, different wide receivers and things like that there. And, with the hype that's surrounding the New York Jets, obviously with Aaron Rodgers back now. But what are your general thoughts about this division here, Chris?
Yeah, fairly similar. If I think 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers, how much do we get out of him? Can he stay healthy? Can Garrett Wilson take that step to be, one of the upper echelon receivers? Not that he's already not in that class, but can he take a step with the, not Zach Wilson as his quarterback to to put himself in that upper stratosphere of wide receivers? How much does, having him back help somebody like Breece Hall in that backfield? The Jets are going to be interesting, because I do feel like they have a top offensive line. They have a really good defense. Nathaniel Hackett is still there. Defensive coordinator is still there going into year 4. So not a lot of turnover. Robert Saleh's still there. I think the Jets are going to be very interesting. They just need, I feel like they just need health to be on this side. We know that they've been extremely unhealthy as far as luck. They've been extremely unlucky as far as health goes. And you mentioned it with the Patriots, man. This is not the Patriots that you've watched over the last 2 decades. If you're looking for them to be great this year, even going into the last preseason game against the Commanders just a few nights ago on Sunday, there was a quarterback, controversy going into that with, Jacoby Brissett and, as you mentioned, Drake May. So we'll see what happens with the Patriots. They are projected to have a bottom 5 offensive line, wide receiver group, and quarterback group. So, yeah, not a lot to really write home about if you're a Patriots fan and you got all new head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator. Granted, some of those guys have been around New England, but I think you will start to see some of the effects without having Belichick there. The Dolphins are interesting to me, because when I did some deep digging on them, they're night and day when they're playing, teams that are good versus teams that are bad. It's really just that flat. Call it out. 1-6 straight up and against the number last season, scoring just 16 points per game when they were playing against a team that had a winning record, and 8-1 straight up and against the spread when they were playing against a team that had a losing record. So, I love what they do. I love Tua. We talked about skinny Tua on the show already earlier this season. And, having McDaniels back there and just how quickly he gets rid of the football, I think is going to be great for this team. You upgrade the defensive coordinator and bring over Anthony Weaver from Baltimore defensive line, which I think it should be helpful for them. Yep. But can they stay healthy? Really elite cornerbacks with Ramsey and Fuller out there. But how much help will they get from the front seven? And how good will their offensive line be? They need an offensive line to be good so that they can let plays develop down the field a little bit more and everything's not, so fast. So I'm interested to see what the Dolphins do, man. Hopefully they can take a step in the right direction. And you mentioned Buffalo. I got a player prop of Buffalo, so I won't talk about them too much here. But this is brand new wide receivers set. You still got Sean McDermott there. You still got Josh Allen, but you upgrade the offensive coordinator and bring in Joe Brady, which I think is going to be interesting. New defensive coordinator as well, even though he was on a part of the group already. I think people are selling on Buffalo, and we'll talk about why, especially with the skill position turnover. The wide receiver room gets a little older. I kind of feel like outside of Keon Coleman as well. So a lot to dig into here. Does Buffalo stay as strong as they finished the season? I think 6-1 before they ended up losing. I'm excited to jump into it, man, with you and talk about some of these props.
Yeah, before we get into it here, let me remind everybody about the merch store over at the store.sportsgamblingpodcast.com. You get 10% off of everything with promo code football in honor of football season here, whether it's at the collegiate level or at the professional level. Get in there. We get some college experience gear, obviously with college football here. Great time for one of our popular shirts. Refs are terrorist t-shirts. Those ones are always popular. But you can get over to the store there. 10% off with promo code football. And like I mentioned, with college football kicking off this week, tune in to the Sports Gambling Podcast and the College Football Experience for Week 1 picks. All right, Chris, let's get into it here, man. At AFC East Division, player prop number 1, where are you taking us?
We'll start in Buffalo. And I'm going Josh Allen, I'm fading him. As difficult as it is, Josh Allen has been absolutely immaculate. Has had a really, really good strong career so far. But I'm fading his touchdowns here, under 27.5. Low juice minus 125. Definitely shop around, see if you can find a better number than I did. But I thought it was interesting that the number is juiced to the under for Josh Allen. And you just take a look at some of his recent seasons, and he's crushed his number. 29 touchdowns last season, 35 in 2022, 36 in 2021, 37 in 2020. Blah 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 blah. Right? Why is the number set so low this year? I'll tell you why. Buffalo is actually projected to face the most difficult slate of defenses in the NFL. They have road games this season where they play in Baltimore, they play in Houston, they play in New York versus the Jets, and that's all before week 7. They don't get a bye until week 12. But also you look at the rest of this, slate of pass defenses. We just talked about Miami and how good their pass defense is, with Fuller and probably a top 5 secondary in Miami. You got a game against Kansas City. You get to host them, but you got San Francisco coming in. It's not the greatest spot for them. Then you got, divisional games, and we expect New England to be somewhat competent, at least on the defensive end. You got the Jets again, because that's another divisional game. So I think, I don't like that they get a step up in competition as far as facing the most, projected worst slate of defense, strongest slate of defenses this season, The other thing is the offensive line is actually ranked 22nd going into the season. So you're kind of, if you're playing the over, you're kind of hoping that, that they can actually hold up, The Bills are also projected to face the number 1 most difficult schedule of offenses in a lineup of top 10 quarterbacks, which means that the defense could be on the field a lot more. We know that when we look on the defensive side, which we don't talk too much about it on this show sometimes, but that whole secondary is gone. They lost both corners and both safeties. So that's going to look a little different for Buffalo this season also. And when I look back and I see that Josh Allen only passed for 29 touchdowns with significantly better skill position players around him, in my opinion, that tells me that this prop dropped for a reason, especially with it being less than it was in the last 4 years. I think Sean McDermott is going to do a solid job of keeping a balanced attack going forward. You still got James Cook in the backfield, and that's also a thought process. There's also the thought process, and last point I'll make, of 15 of those touchdowns that he threw last season, are to receivers that are no longer on the team, and Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. So I just think that, based on totality, not that he can't have a successful season, not that he can't throw for a lot of yards, but I do think 28 touchdowns is a lot given what's around them at this point in time. Keon Coleman, and I think he's going to be pretty good. And you still got Dalton Kincaid, you still got Dawson Knox, Knox out there, and you got some of those older wide receivers as well. But I don't think he's going to throw 28 touchdowns. So I'm fading Josh Allen to start the Propcast, taking the under here. I didn't even talk about injury. Hopefully he doesn't get injured, but if he misses a game or two, of course this number probably drops also. So I'll go under on Josh Allen to start here. Under 27.5 touchdowns for Mr. Josh Allen.
Hey, take a look, like you mentioned, for this AFC East division, right? That right now, according to PFF rankings for secondaries in particular, Miami's number 5, New York Jets are number 1, Buffalo within his own team are, I think, ranked number 10. Buffalo was in, number 3 actually. So Jets are number 1, Buffalo's 3, and then you have Miami that's ranked number 5. The only one that takes a significant drop off is going to be the New England Patriots, right? Just some questions in that secondary, but if they play up to potential, they could be one of the elite secondaries in the entire league. So that's 6 games right there within your own division that you're going to have to go up against. And I know you mentioned the Texans in there. Derek Stingley Jr. Seems like he's primed to have a big season. A lot of great things that he was doing in the preseason as well. And hopefully he can live up to why the Texans drafted him number 3 overall. But you also take a look at some of the other teams that they will be playing this season, right? And the thing that you take a look at for this Bills schedule, I believe 4 of their first 6 games are on the road. And that's always tough sledding as well, right? But they also have games, like you mentioned, against the Chiefs in there. That is at home. The Niners come to town as well. Niners are, again, one of the better defenses as well. They're ranked I believe, number 2 as far as secondaries go. So, yeah, it might be a tough year for Josh Allen, at least accumulating the touchdowns. So I'll go into mine here, which kind of correlates with what you mentioned. I took his rushing yards to go over for Josh Allen. That number's at 480.5 over on DraftKings right now. And you take a look at what Josh Allen has done throughout his career, right, as a starting quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. He's gone over this projection in every single season except for one. And like you mentioned, health has been on his side for Josh Allen. And the thing we talked about right now for the Buffalo Bills is that it's a brand new receiving group, right? Outside of the tight ends, with Dawson Knox has been there, Dalton Kincaid entering his second year for this Buffalo Bills. But rookie, you mentioned Keon Coleman. I think Khalil Shakir, yeah, he's been there as well. But you're asking some of these guys that were possibly number 3, number 4 guys to now step up to be possibly number 1 guys, number 2 guys for this offense. But when we talk a lot about the scrambling quarterbacks in the league, right? We talked extensively about Lamar Jackson. Both you and I wholeheartedly agreed about over on his rushing yards, just because you sometimes just can't take that running ability away from these types of quarterbacks. And I think maybe Josh Allen's not up to I don't say
Lamar
like up
Jackson.
to, yeah, like Lamar Jackson level. I don't say Jalen Hurts, but like the Justin Fields. We saw it with Justin Fields where his scrambling abilities there. But he's going to make the plays with his legs when he needs to. And I think the one thing that you worry about for Josh Allen is that he's not afraid to take that contact when he is running downhill, which could lead to injury. But I mean, just take a looking at the numbers of what Josh Allen has done throughout his career. As far as rushing yards wise, like I mentioned, one season where he hasn't gone over this projection of 480.5. And I'll just quickly read off some of the numbers on what he has done from scrimmage yards perspective and running on the ground. 631, 510, 421 in 2020, but over the last 3 seasons, 763, 762, and the last season, 524. So not asking him to do a whole heck of a lot here. 500 he can definitely do. Like I mentioned, he's done it in 5 out of the 6 seasons here as well for the Buffalo Bills here, Chris. So I took Josh Allen over 480.5 rushing yards for the Buffalo Bills for this upcoming season. Thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I like it. Just to keep it short and concise. I mentioned the offensive line being, 20th. If they're not, getting a lot of early down success, we're going to see him use his legs, which is something that we haven't, he hasn't shied away from in his career. I think Sean McDermott is more willing to trust him and put him in some of those, RPOs where he can decide whether he wants to run or he needs to extend the play. And, those opportunities are going to present itself. And when you're not as, connected, or, you don't have that chemistry and camaraderie with, some of the newer guys, because we talked about some of his targets. Well, a lot of his targets kind of changing.
Mm-hmm.
It could lead him to, have a little bit more confidence in his legs than throw into some of those wide receivers. So yeah, I like this one. Up and over. You said the number was 480, right?
480.5 on DraftKings. I think everything else was above 500. Let me just double check here again for Josh Allen. It was over on DraftKings. Let's see here. So 480.5 on DraftKings, 485.5 on FanDuel, on BetMGM, and then 500.5 on Caesars there. So again, the best of the number over there on DraftKings, and then both FanDuel and BetMGM have 485.5. All right, before we continue the conversation here, let me tell everyone about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Hey, you baseball mania junkies, it's time to get over there to Underdog Fantasy, because they are giving $15 million in prizes with their best ball fantasy football leagues and tournaments that they do have going on for the upcoming season. And also the great thing, you can also use specials and boosts in all flex entries on Underdog Fantasy. So make sure you guys sign up with promo code MACHINE to claim your special pick and first time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash. The NFL season is right around the corner. College football week 0 was last week. You guys need to take advantage of this promo because this is the first time that they've offered, at least the times that we've had them on our shows, 1,000 in bonus cash. So now would be the time to get over to Underdog Fantasy if you haven't already. Open an account, but do me a favor, make sure you guys use that promo code MACHINE over at underdogfantasy.com. All right, Chris, let's keep it rolling here, my man. Take us over to your next player prop. What do you got?
All right, let's go to New York and talk about the Jets. I am taking.
I think we have agreement here.
Wilson, I'm taking him up and over the 87.5 receptions here. And there's some, only a little bit of VIG. I saw it at minus 112 over on FanDuel, but this is up to 90.5 on a couple other books as well. So definitely shop around, get the best of the number. This feels kind of safe to me. If I know we don't talk about, NFL plays being safe, but I think, outside of the chances that a 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers could potentially get hurt again, even still, Garrett Wilson had 95 receptions last season, and Zach Wilson was his quarterback. So I think there's been mention of Aaron Rodgers saying that, Wilson kind of reminds him a lot of his previous, big target in Devontae Adams. And I went back and looked at it, not to put these two people on, in the same stratosphere, but 3 of his 4 last seasons playing with Devontae Adams, Devontae Adams finished with 111 catches, 115 catches, and 123 catches, And the only season he actually went under was a game he played 12 games. And in those 12 games, he still finished with 83 receptions. I know that, like I said, they're not the same receiver, but I think it's a testament, more so what I'm getting to, is that Aaron Rodgers falls in love with his number 1 receiver as he kind of builds that chemistry. We've seen it year over year over year. And I think he'll just going to continue to target that guy, whether it's a deep ball down the field, which he's been, able to show that he still can throw the deep ball. And Garrett Wilson can also be a possession receiver because we know he's a big, lengthy, strong guy that, has a really nice catch radius. So if that's the case, I think that he will have success here this season. I like him up and over. The other thing I wanted to mention is his counterpart. You got Mike Williams, who has historically dealt with some injuries. As a matter of fact, over the last 2 seasons, he's only played in 16 games over the last 2 seasons. And he got injured with an ACL injury. He's coming off an ACL injury. He'll be 30 in October as well. And he hasn't played a game since week 3 last season. So I'm not sure how much he's going to be able to help me out. I just think that, given the current layout, whether, like I said, it still feels safe if Aaron Rodgers does go down with an injury. But if he's going to play, I think Garrett Wilson is absolutely going to have, as the market is already priced, I think he's up to 1,100 receiving yards is what the consensus is, or something close to that. But I do think he's going for 90 receptions this season. So I like Garrett Wilson here enough. I'll take him up and over the 87.5 receptions.
Yeah, this is one I had as well. It was something the same conversation that we talked about with Mike Evans, whether you take his yardage or whether you take his receptions. And it's, we made the comparisons to Devontae Adams, but for the right reasons, right? Because Aaron Rodgers is a guy that will trust a guy that he has chemistry with, and he knows that has reliable hands, number one. And that Devontae Adams was that guy for so many years when he was with the Packers. And I mean, you just take a look at his first 2 seasons, right, Chris, for Garrett Wilson, with all the quarterback turnover that they've had there with Zach Wilson and Flacco and, some of the other guys that they had filling in. The targets were always there for Garrett Wilson, right? Rookie season, 83 receptions, 147 targets. Last season, 95 receptions on 168 targets. But now you bring in a former MVP in Aaron Rodgers. And again, hopefully, like we mentioned, that health hopefully is on the side of the Jets for this upcoming season, because I feel like Garrett Wilson, and if Aaron Rodgers both stay healthy and they play the full 17 games, Garrett Wilson's name could be in that conversation for leading the leading the league in receiving yards for this upcoming season. Right now, it is projected for him to have the consensus numbers around 1,125 and a half. So I think the books are thinking the same thing that we do, that he does have a monster season. But I agree with you. I do like the receptions here over as well. That's over at FanDuel right now, 87 and a half. DraftKings has it up at over 90 and a half at minus 125. So you could get a discount of about 3 receptions here over on FanDuel. But I think this is going to be a big year for Garrett Wilson and this offense led by Aaron Rodgers. And it's always, like you mentioned, it's the comparisons that we do make with Devontae Adams, and not saying, like you mentioned, they're not the same type of player. Maybe Garrett Wilson could be on that type of trajectory stats wise. But I think this is going to be a big year for Garrett Wilson. So I agree with you. I also had the receptions over 87 and a half for Garrett Wilson. And I couldn't talk you off of the yardage either. I think that he could walk into 1,200 yards easily. The last 2 seasons, I should say, quickly should mention this, 1,103 receiving yards in his rookie season. And then last year fell a little bit short of this number. But again, we talked about how bad the quarterback play was for the Jets. 1,042 receiving yards last year for Garrett Wilson. But again, I think this might be a big year for him, with the Jets and Aaron Rodgers there. All right, Chris, let's go over to player prop number 3, man. What do you got?
So I'm going back to Buffalo, and I know I talked about Josh Allen going under on his touchdowns, but I do think a large majority of those touchdowns are going to go to this guy. And that guy would be none other than Dalton Kincaid. I think we look at Dalton Kincaid and we see the type of season that he had last season. You also see this wide receiver room change a lot. We mentioned Gabe Davis not being there anymore. We mentioned Stephon Diggs not being there anymore. You add the older pieces, that I don't think are really touchdown targets specifically in the red zone. And some of those guys, Curtis Samuel, right? Chase Claypool, MVS, right? A guy like Keon Coleman, I think will, but he'll pan out, I think, and be a really great possession receiver. He's 6'3", 213 pounds out of FSU. I think he's gonna get his fair share of looks, but I think especially when they get down to that red zone, I'm thinking Kincaid goes up and over the total for his touchdowns. And this is the first time I've ever given out an under for a quarterback, but an over for a tight end. But you can get this at 5.5 right now. I know he only had 2 last season, but I'm just looking at some of what we think is going to be successful for this team is that 2 tight end set that Buffalo ran last season with Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox both in there. And you go back and look at it through week 5, the Bills used the second highest tight end. They had the second highest tight end rate of 2+ tight ends on the field. And when Buffalo was able to use those 2 tight ends, their pass efficiency, of course, skyrocketed. It went through the roof. An EPA per attempt, success rate, yards per attempt, all of those different things. So I think with him primed to, I think the organization in general is really betting, a lot on Dalton Kincaid. And I do think that Josh Allen will make enough plays and get him the ball, specifically in the red zone. If I think that'll be one of his favorite, new weapons with no Stephon Diggs being there kind of demanding the football. So I like him to go up and over to 5.5. This number is juiced all the way to minus 145 on one book, but you can actually get it at minus 102 on another book. So saving you 43 cents. And, the median is about minus 120. So I like that we can get it, just for him to get 6 touchdowns, just given how many targets I'm projecting him to have this season.
Yep.
I'll take Dalton Kincaid to go up and over the 5.5 touchdowns here.
Yeah, I want to be shocked if you do see Dalton Kincaid be in the range of 100 targets this upcoming season. And hopefully a lot of those do come in the red zone for him. Last season, 73 receptions on 91 targets, played in 16 of the 17 games last year. Only equated to about 673 receiving yards, but he did have 2 touchdowns last year. And I think that now, obviously, when you have these rookie tight ends, that there's a learning curve, right? Especially being at the NFL level. But I mean, we talked about it, right? Like for this upcoming season, the wide receiving group, obviously no more Stephon Diggs, no more Gabe Davis. You're relying then on Khalil Shakir. Keon Coleman, like we mentioned. But I think, we'll probably see, like you mentioned, Chris, a lot of 2 tight end sets with Dawson Knox and more importantly, Dalton Kincaid here. So wouldn't be surprised if he does have another big year, or does have a big year, I should say, with receiving touchdowns, because last season, Chris, Diggs and Davis combined for 15 receiving touchdowns. So that's got to go somewhere, right? For this Buffalo Bills team. And I think the beneficiary of that will be Dalton Kincaid for this offense. 6'4", 240 pounds. So again, that's a big target for Josh Allen to have when it comes to the red zone for this upcoming season. So I do love that. All right, for my third player prop, I was having a little difficulty finding one. And I wanted to go to the Miami side, and in particular in the backfield. And I know Raheem Mostert is coming off of the season where he had 18 touchdowns for this team. And according to their depth chart, as of right now, it seems like he is slated to be the starter there. I know Devon Achane is dealing with an injury. The number right now is 7.5 for Raheem Mostert's touchdowns. And look, last 2 seasons, he's been, especially last season, when he's healthy, like, we know what he can do. But I think that 18 touchdowns last year, Chris, may have been a little bit of an outlier for this offense, and in particular, Raheem Mostert. Because you take a look right now, the number is 7.5, like I mentioned, and you take a look at Raheem Mostert's numbers throughout his career. Number one, he's dealt with injury, for the entirety of his career. And, you feel bad for the guy, because we know what type of talent he can be, for any given team, especially when his days with the 49ers. I mean, there was seasons where he only played 1 game, got injured in the first game. There was games where he played only 8 games, 9 games. And in the 2 seasons that he's been with the Dolphins, he's been healthy, right? 2022, he played 16 games, had 3 rushing touchdowns. And then last season, of course, like you mentioned, 15 games, had a really good season. First season where he had 1,000 rushing yards for this team. But again, like I mentioned, 18 rushing touchdowns for Raheem Mostert. And you kind of go through his game log last year. I mean, there were multiple games last season, especially to start the season early, where he had 2 touchdown games. I'm not sure that's going to be there. I think there's going to be one. I think number one, when Devon Achane is healthy, I have a gut feeling that he may take over as the number one running back for this group for the Miami Dolphins. And again, injury luck and injury history has really not been on the side for him, Mostert. And I'm not, wishing that he gets injured, obviously, because we know what type of player he is. It's just based on what we saw last year. I think last year was just an outlier for him. So Raheem Mostert, I'm going to take the under on his rushing touchdowns for this upcoming season, just based off that. I think there will be more of a split carries for the backfield there. And we know that this team in particular, Chris, obviously when you have the speed with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, that they are going to be a more of a passing offense. And I'm not saying that the running attack is not going to be there, but I just feel like based off of last year, I think there's some type of regression due here for Raheem Mostert, at least getting the touchdowns. Their schedule of rush defenses isn't too bad. They do face some of the bottom ones with the Cardinals in there, the Titans in there as well. But again, you take a look at this division in particular, especially in the final couple of weeks there, where it could make the difference. They have the Jets, who have a great rushing defense, the 49ers, the Browns in there as well. They start the season against the Jaguars, which have a pretty good rush defense there as well. They face the Colts in there as well. So they have a schedule of above, I think a difficult schedule with teams that have an above average rush defense and a schedule of rush defenses here. So I say all that to take Raheem Mostert here under 7.5 on his rushing touchdowns here, Chris. Let me make sure. And I think that number has now gone down to 5.5. So I'll still give it out at, that's receiving touchdowns. Let me go back to rushing touchdowns.
If you're moving lines out here like that by 2.
No. That was for another player. Actually, I don't know why it defaulted to George Kittle here. So let me go back to Raheem Mostert. It is at 7.5 is the number I'll give it out at. There are 8.5s out there, Chris, but it's at -150 and -169. And I don't want to lay that kind of juice, for a season long player prop. So I'll officially give it out at 7.5 here, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, you make a lot of sense. If I talked about, just this the Dolphins last season when they were playing against teams that had a winning record. I said that they were 1-6 in those games versus being 8-1 in games where they were playing against a team that had a record that was above 50%. And the biggest thing that jumped out to me was the points per game, 37 points per game when they were playing against a team that had a losing record. Only 16 points per game when they were playing against a team that had a winning record. And that lets me know that the offense just wasn't as crisp last
Yeah.
year. And the other thing I think you take into consideration, and so to that point, they went 1-5 against playoff teams last season, and this season they're actually projected to face 10 teams that had a record of above 50% and that are projected to have another record of above 50% this season. So that doesn't bode well for this offense, and that's one of the reasons I kind of stayed away from the Miami Dolphins. There's a couple nicked up guys on that offensive line that could also hinder you as well. And we're being honest, if this offensive line is actually the worst unit for this team. They're the only bottom 10, well, in the front seven as well, but they're the only bottom 10 unit on the field for this team is the offensive line. And you got two offensive linemen, a tackle and a guard that are already kind of limping into the season, and they're starters. So all of those things kind of work in your favor. Definitely should be some regression to the mean. And I'll be with you here taking fading Mr. Achane.
All right, before we get into some honorable mentions for the upcoming season here for the AFC East Division, let me tell everyone about our friends over at Rhythm. Have you ever wanted to create your own sports betting model for football? Do you even know how a sports betting modeling works? SGPN, we're proud partners of Rhythm. It's the #1 AI-powered sports betting platform that helps provide bettors of all levels the ability to build custom predictive betting models in seconds and get predictions for betting on money lines, spreads, totals, and props. Build your own model, copy one of the top performing models from the leaderboard, or press build a model from for me, and Rhythm will give you predictions for every game and player props, and also has a myriad of stats, research, and trend analysis to give you even more betting insights. The Rhythm college football model loved Delaware State and the points this weekend, and they covered the spread. Not a big sweat there. So again, you can build your own model and get ready for college football week 1. So claim your 7-day free trial by going to sportsgamblingpodcast.com/rhythm. That's sportsgamblingpodcast.com/RITHMM. All right, Chris, any honorable mentions for the AFC East Division here that you were almost close to getting to, but couldn't pull the trigger?
I think the biggest one that sticks out to me, and before I say that, let's say this: the Patriots are their own beast this year. I didn't even see props for Drake May available yet because he hasn't been named. I don't think he's going to even be the starter. If I'm being 100% honest, I think that'll be Jacoby Brissett's job to lose, and he probably will lose it. But if you put Drake May out there to start the season, and who do you go to if he's struggling, right? You want to at least give your fans a glimmer of hope. So I didn't even see, Patriot props, not a lot really listed. And it's difficult to want to take even I was just looking for Jalen Pope, the wide receiver out there. Nope. No, not any real line. So Patriots are their own, monster this season. Don't expecting them to have probably the worst offense in the NFL. Keon Coleman kind of stood out to me a little bit, like I said, he takes over as the probably, Khalil Shakira will be out there as well, but he takes over as one of the top targets for Josh Allen this season. And you mentioned it already, but with Diggs and Gabe Davis both gone, that's 1,900. That's north of 1,900 yards. Somebody's gonna have to be receiving this year. 15 touchdowns removed. You mentioned that as well. And this is a big, physical, imposing wide receiver. I mentioned them early, 6'3", 213 pounds. I'm expecting them to be, a bully at the catch point, and for it to be hard just to take him to the ground. I mean, he's not anybody that's gonna really run past you, but he's a big, physical, possession receiver. And that, like I said, that wide receiver room doesn't really scare me a lot. Outside of us expecting a lot from Shaquille and then those tight ends. So some of those vets, Curtis Samuel, MVS, I don't expect them to have like too big of years. Curtis Samuel probably more of a special teams type player. I remember him from when he was with the Commanders. So Keon Coleman, the number is 625 and a half.
Yeah.
There's also 650 and a half. There's also 675 and a half. So you can kind of, like gauge if, you wanted to fade him or if you wanted to take him. I thought over, but I couldn't get to the trigger. I couldn't quite pull the trigger on that one, so I stayed away from him. And that was really it for me. I like the Dolphins players. Tua, I think, is still set about 4,000 yards again. Yeah. We like to fade when it's that high, but he's coming off 4,500, and we don't expect it to change much. So, I kind of wanted to stay away from there. And it's just a lot of skilled position players as well. I wanted your thoughts, Munaf, and I'll kick it back to you. But for any honorable mentions that you had, but I wanted your thoughts on Mr. Tyreek Hill. Did you look at all, or are you invested on the side? What are your thoughts on the other honorable mentions and Tyreek Hill himself?
Yeah, I really didn't have much as far as honorable mentions for this division. I mean, you talked about the Patriots. I was looking to fade. Whoever the week 1 starting quarterback is going to be, whether it is Jacoby Brissett or whether it is Drake May, we'll find out here sooner rather than later. The number right now for Tyreek Hill consensus is around 1,375 and a half for him. And I mean, couldn't talk you off of taking an over for him just because he's had 1,700 plus receiving yards over his last 2 seasons, or I should say first 2 seasons with the Miami Dolphins. He had 170 plus targets in those first 2 seasons with the Dolphins. So we know it's a Jalen Waddle show. We know it's a Tyreek Hill show there. It's a, 2-trick pony there for the Miami Dolphins. So, but the problem then becomes is that, 1 or 2 injuries could just derail you getting over this number. And we've talked about that a lot throughout these division previews, not only this season, but previous years, that again, those injuries can just, make or break your season-long player prop numbers. So I get it. Look, I understand why the number is 1,375 and a half for Tyreek Hill, because we know what type of threat he is. But I just couldn't get there with that number being that high for Tyreek Hill. And again, I'm going to be wrong, because he's probably going to have another season if he's able to stay healthy and have another 1,700-yard season for the Miami Dolphins. I do have him on one of my fantasy teams, that's for sure. So I'm hoping that he does have a big year, again, yardage wise, and getting touchdowns for the Miami Dolphins for this upcoming season. I liked your Keon Cole angle. That was one I looked into as well, because we mentioned the gap that Gabe Davis and more in particular Stephon Diggs leaves for this offense, right? And a lot to be desired there on who's going to be that guy that's going to, be that featured guy or have a significant role for this team, whether it is going to be Keon Cole or whether it's going to be Khalil Shakir, or whether it is going to be the tight ends. But again, you are going to need your receivers to step up in this spot here. So I'll be curious to see. We'll watch that on a week-to-week basis for Keon Cole for the Buffalo Bills. But that was one player that did intrigue me here. But other than that, I really didn't have a lot for this division. I mean, there's a lot of talent in this division. We talk about the quarterbacks and the receivers in this division outside of obviously the Patriots that we just mentioned. But there's nothing that really was sticking out to me as far as getting there with honorable mentions there. So.
Can I ask you one more,
Yeah, go ahead.
What about, I don't know if you looked into his numbers at all, but Mr. Aaron Rodgers, we didn't really discuss him at too much length. Did you look at his numbers at all? Any of them intrigue you? Over, under? Are you projecting him to stay healthy? I know we were both in a draft last night, and he was on the board for quite a while. Might still be there.
I think I took him even the very final 3 rounds just to have just in case. He has a big season for the New York Jets. So right now, I'm seeing his number. The lowest I see is 3,600 and a half over at FanDuel. The highest I see is 3,675 and a half over at Caesars and BetMGM. Touchdowns are right now at 25 and a half for Aaron Rodgers. And so the thing with Aaron Rodgers, number one for me, is the depth at the wide receiving group for the Jets. And we talked about Garrett Cole a lot here. Let me see. I just want to kind of get to their wide receiving group. So we're both very high, obviously, on Garrett Wilson for this upcoming season. And we've seen this plenty of times throughout his career for Aaron Rodgers, is that if he throws you the ball and you drop it, you're probably not going to see the ball again for the rest of the game, maybe for the rest of the season. Let me get over to the depth chart here for the.
There's not a lot to like there,
Yeah. So, and I see a lot of reasons why Brees Hall is going like top 3, top 4 when it comes to fantasy drafts, because there might be a heavy reliance on him in the running game. But it's Xavier Gibson, it's Alan Lazard, it's Mike Williams, like you mentioned, it's Garrett Wilson. So outside of Garrett Wilson, it almost feels like it's going to be plug and play for this New York Jets offense. The age part is what scares you, right? Because, I mean, he's going to be 40 years old, or is 40 years old. He's going to turn 41 in December. So that gives you concerns. But I think we'll watch it on a week-to-week basis here, Chris. The one over I may be intrigued by for Aaron Rodgers is those interceptions. It's only at 7.5. Look, I know that he hasn't thrown a lot of interceptions throughout his career, but when the frustration mounts for Aaron Rodgers, like, I feel like he could get up and over this numbers. 7.5 asking him isn't a lot. And we talked about some of the past defenses that these teams are going to play within the division, right? So I think there's a possibility that he could get over this interceptions number. The touchdown number is at 26.5, 25.5. You could get that over on FanDuel as the lowest number. Again, Chris, I think for us is we're going to have to see, or I'm particularly going to see how he's doing in those first couple of games, because they do start against the San Francisco 49ers on Monday Night Football. And I believe they have some division games in there as well. They go to Tennessee, and then they have the Patriots, the Broncos, the Vikings, the Bills in there as well. So going to be interesting to see those first couple of weeks for Aaron Rodgers. I really didn't have much for him, but if you had a gun to my head, I would probably look at the over 7.5 interceptions for him.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. I think if I'm looking at Aaron Rodgers, I think on a weekly basis, just for people to kind of, if you're taking notes, I think I'm gonna go under on his rushing yards. Of course, we don't have a season long rushing number. I didn't see one anywhere, but I just think coming off that such a gruesome injury, I think they're gonna probably try to take it slow with him. I expect the Jets offense to try to get the ball out quick, right? You don't want them taking those hits, and they did a lot to kind of re-up and reshore that offensive line. But I think it'll be a bunch of quick throws, and I don't think we'll see Aaron Rodgers, especially losing a year of mobility. He's closer to 41 than he is to 40, and at this stage of his career, he's not the spring chicken that he used to be. So I think I'll be looking to fade him on a weekly basis with some of those rushing yards. If I think that could be, especially at the beginning of the season as he tries to get acclimated to playing full contact and, got defenders, running at him. I think San Francisco is a great place to start.
Yeah. So again, it's just kind of deja vu if you're a Jets fan, because you get that Monday Night Football game again where he did suffer the injury last season. But hopefully there's no PTSD this year for the Jets and Aaron Rodgers, because again, like we mentioned, there's just a lot of hype coming around this Jets team. And they did, honestly, Chris, they did actually move to the odds-on favorite to win this division in the AFC East Division there. So, we'll definitely be keeping our eyes on Aaron Rodgers as the season progresses here. Anything else you want to mention before we get to best bets?
Nah, I'm good.
All right, let's get over to best bets in this division for the AFC East here. Chris, where do you want to go?
I'll go Josh Allen. I really, really like Josh Allen. I also really, really like, almost like a double best bet, because I really like Dalton Kincaid.
Kincaid.
Well.
Yeah, Kincaid. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me get it right. Almost like I guess I can't go. I want to go double best bet. Give me a second here. Not on two props that can definitely hit, but are contradiction in themselves. So we'll go Josh Allen under, though. We'll keep it simple here and go Josh Allen under the 27.5 passing touchdowns, which is, for a lot of reasons what we talked about. Mentioned Buffalo projected to face the number one, most difficult schedule of offenses, so their offense may not be on the field as much, but they also projected to face the toughest slate of defenses as well. some really, really tough games with Baltimore, Houston. Of course, they got the divisional games against the Jets twice. This is difficult. All those are for week 7, and they got a lot more difficult games as well. And this wide receiving room doesn't really scare me. Like I said, if they're going to have to, prove it. And I think the under 27.5 is indicative of the bookmakers putting it at under 27.5 is indicative of, those skill position players being gone. There is no Gabe Davis. There is no Stephon Diggs anymore. So we'll see what Josh Allen can do with those new shiny toys, but I don't think that he's going to pass for 28 touchdowns this season. And we'll go under for the best bet here.
Couldn't talk you off of that, man. Again, I think it's going to be a big year for the Buffalo Bills in perspective of where do they want to go with their future. I think there's sometimes a lot of question marks at that head coaching position because that's the first one that gets the blame because we know Josh Allen is going to be the future of this team at the quarterback position. So
year number 8 for Sean McDermott this season too.
Yeah. So again, if they're not able to have a season where they get to the AFC Championship again, at minimum, Chris, we may see some changes coming up. But again, for Josh Allen, I think it's going to be like a transitional year. Obviously with the new weapons or their lack thereof that we did talk about, but I think Dalton Kincaid, should have a big role in this offense for the Buffalo Bills there as well. For my best bet, I think it's Garrett Wilson, man. You and I both liked him. I think it's going to be a big year for him. I think even regardless, God forbid that Aaron Rodgers does get hurt. I think that we know that the targets are going to be there. And we just kind of went through the wide receiving group or lack thereof for the New York Jets. And, we talked about Devontae Adams and the history that he and Aaron Rodgers had for so many years with Green Bay. And I think those targets and those type of receptions, those type of numbers, Garrett Wilson is definitely going to be able to put up with Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback there. We've seen what he's done in this first 2 seasons with all the different quarterbacks that they've had there for the New York Jets. We talked about Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco. I believe Mike White was in there for this team as well. So just has been a lot of moving parts. And I think for this team, they just kind of want that at least one season to have that stability at that quarterback position. So, yeah, I'm going to go Garrett Wilson. We'll go over on the receptions. The number was 87.5. Don't be surprised if we see a season where he has 150, 160 targets that are accurate passes, right? Coming from a guy like Aaron Rodgers. I think that's going to be the key there for Garrett Wilson. But again, don't be surprised, like I mentioned in the earlier episode, Chris, I think you would agree with me as well, is that he could be a player that could lead the league in receiving yards, or at least be in that conversation or be in there in that top 3 because he's that type of player entering year 3 for the New York Jets. So
back shoulder fade, back shoulder fade.
Back shoulder fades all day. Yeah, so Garrett Wilson over 87.5 receptions for this upcoming season for the New York Jets as my best bet for the AFC East. All right, 7 down, and that will leave 1 division left, which I may or may not have purposely saved for last for Chris's benefit, talking about the NFC East. Did see some news come down, obviously, with CeeDee Lamb. We'll expand on that when we do get to that episode, and some of these wide receivers that are getting their contracts, for the future and securing their bags here. But we'll talk all about more in detail in the last and final episode of our season previews before we get ready for the for the regular season. And like I mentioned, the NFC East will be the final division preview that we do. So this was the 7th one. Again, still plenty of time, like I've said, to go back and listen to the other episodes. Chris, anything else, man, you want to mention before we go our separate ways?
Not as it, man. Definitely, like Munaf mentioned, go back and check out the other pods if you guys are new listeners. And, give us a rating over there as well if you guys are, you would be so kind. It's definitely appreciated. And make sure you guys are following the pod. That's it. Bet responsibly, and we'll catch you guys for NFC East on Thursday. Excited to get through my Commanders, the Eagles, the good old Cowboys, and those New York Giants. So we'll see you guys on Thursday, man.
Yeah, 100%. Again, a good reminder, if you haven't already, subscribed to the Propcast, whether it's on YouTube, where we do go live, or whether it's on Spotify, whether it's on Apple, please go in and do so, because this is where we'll be all season long with our player props weekly for the NFL season. And also, like I've mentioned, for the NBA season as well. So definitely looking forward to that as well. Make sure you guys follow Chris on Twitter at ChrisBeCappinn with 2 P's and 2 N's. You can follow me there as well at SportsNerd824. Till then, good luck with your bets. Let's break these books off, and always remember to let it ride.